Hey guys, Craig Peter G here. Wanted to share some good news actually. Yeah, it's from America, but it is to do with the social media companies who have engaged in a level of censorship on their platforms for 3 or 4 years now, big time, probably since Trump got in. At every turn, these social media companies have engaged in, as I said, an unprecedented level of censorship to stop people having an alternative view on their platforms, an alternative view to the official narrative, so-called official narrative. As you might recall, back in June, the US Department of Justice and Trump, in conjunction with Trump making an executive order that was to try and mitigate online censorship, then the Justice Department came out and said they were conducting an investigation into a certain part of the Communications Decency Act, which basically gave social media companies free rein to decide what they would allow on their platforms and what they wouldn't. The whole idea of the Communications Decency Act was to, as far as I understand it, was to allow the social media platforms to, like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, for example, to, stop hate speech, to stop the publishing of pornography, to give them that power, to stop genuine, hate crimes being filtered through broadcast on these platforms. But of course, the social media companies have politicized that power to try and malign the US administration of Trump, to try and curb any speech that supports Trump, or that talks about child trafficking, or that talks about crooked politicians, any speech that talks about vaccine truth, for example. Well, as we know, and most of us have experienced time after time after time, Facebook and Twitter. I'm not on Twitter, but I've heard of many accounts being shut down on Twitter. Accounts being shut down, voices being silenced, and alternatives to the official narrative being just shadow banned or completely fact checked. God, how many times have we seen a fact checking post come through saying it's not allowed to be seen, right? Now, so in June, I'm just reading from the media release here. In June, President Trump signed an executive order preventing online censorship. Let me just bring that up. Yes, so on the 28th of May, Trump signed an executive order on preventing online censorship, and it was, I'll just read the preamble to that order. He says, "Free speech is the bedrock of American democracy. Our founding fathers protected this sacred right." Oh, let's just backtrack a minute. Free speech is the bedrock of all society, from tribes to communities to towns to cities to countries. Free speech has always been the bedrock of global democracy. I wouldn't even use the word democracy. Global freedom, I would call it. God gave us a voice. He gave us a mind. We were created with these things to use them. We were created with a mouth and a mouthpiece to speak up, to provide an alternative view of things, to challenge what we now know are crooked, very crooked government bureaucrats and official bureaucrats and governments. Okay, so freedom of speech should never be censored. If you're threatening to kill someone online, physically kill them, then yeah, if you're promoting radical terrorism, then yes, there is a place for censorship. So Trump's been working behind the scenes to try and put a stop to this censorship through legislative amendment. And the legislation is the Communication Decency Act. Trump goes on to say in his executive order, I'll post the link to that executive order below the video. In a country that has long cherished the freedom of expression, we cannot allow a limited number of online platforms to handpick the speech that Americans may access and convey on the internet. Pardon me. This practice is fundamentally un-American and anti-democratic. When large, powerful social media companies, and I'm adding in here like Facebook, like Twitter, like YouTube, like Google, censor opinions with which they disagree, they exercise a dangerous power. They cease functioning as passive bulletin boards and ought to be viewed and treated as content creators. So that was in May. So Attorney General Barr has been working with the Justice Department to devise an amendment to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And just yesterday, the Justice Department has unveiled its proposed Section 230 amendment. And I just wanted to read this out to you. And I'll also post a link to the media release in the video, okay? So today, on behalf of the Trump administration, the Department of Justice sent draft legislation to Congress to reform Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. The draft legislative text implements reforms that the Department of Justice deemed necessary in its June recommendations and follows a year-long review of the outdated statute. The legislation also executes President Trump's directive from executive order that I just read out. For too long, this is quoting William Barr, for too long Section 230 has provided a shield for online platforms to operate with impunity, said Attorney General Barr, ensuring that the internet is a safe but also vibrant, open and competitive environment is vitally important to America. We therefore urge Congress to make these necessary reforms to Section 230 and begin to hold online platforms accountable, both when they unlawfully censor speech and when they also knowingly facilitate criminal activity online. So in other words, what these social media companies have been doing is running rampant over people speaking freely and having that alternative narrative. But also, alongside that, they've been allowing criminal content to go on to their platforms, like things that to do with pedophilia and child sex trafficking, like supporting it and condoning it. So they're not censoring stuff that they should be censoring. The department's proposal, this is the Justice Department, the department's proposal is an important step in reforming Section 230 to further its original goal, which was to provide liability protection to encourage good behaviour online. The proposal makes clear that when interactive computer services willfully distribute illegal material or moderate content in bad faith, Section 230 should not shield them from the consequences of their actions. So up until now, Section 230 has taken this blanket approach to protecting the online social media companies from litigation, from from investigation. So this amendment, this proposed amendment, which is going to go before Congress, basically winds back that protection. This goes a long way in restoring free speech to these platforms that started off. These social media platforms are not publishers. Okay, they're internet-based free speech platforms. That was their purpose and intent when they started off, right? That was how they sold their platforms to the media authorities, if you like, to get a license to operate. And as we've said over the years, they have politicized those platforms into supporting and endorsing a predetermined agenda for the deep state and the crooked politicians and mainstream media. Okay, that's how they've politicized the social media platforms. I'll go on. The Department of Justice is grateful to all the experts, victims groups, academics, businesses, and other stakeholders that have and continue to engage closely with the department during this process. The White House, under Trump's leadership, put out a request, like a public phone-in, but you could email. This was about probably 8 months ago, asking for public submissions into how they had been affected by social media censorship. And many, many people wrote to the White House expressing their cases, presenting their cases. And it was based on that information, plus the Department of Justice's own internal investigations, plus they had a Senate inquiry with the social media companies as well. So based on all that information that the Justice Department has been gathering, they've now brought in this proposed legislation. So what I will do is, I'll just read this bit. The Department of Justice's draft legislation focuses on two areas of reform, both of which are at minimum necessary to recalibrate the outdated immunity of Section 230. Now, the two sections of reform that this legislative amendment addresses are promoting transparency and open discourse and addressing illicit activity online. So they're the two main areas that this legislation will address. Section 230 immunity is meant to incentivise and protect online Good Samaritans. Platforms that purposely solicit and facilitate harmful criminal activity, in effect online bad Samaritans, should not receive the benefit of this immunity, nor should a platform receive blanket immunity for continuing to host known criminal content on its services, despite repeated pleas from victims to take action. Right? So if someone's been the victim of a crime and they haven't had any been able to gain remedy through the system, despite the going through all the due processes and everything, and they get online and they say and they speak about their ordeal with the justice system and or the police, it shouldn't be censored, because the victim is reaching out. It's trying to reach out for public support. The department also proposes to more clearly carve out federal civil enforcement actions from Section 230. Although federal criminal prosecutions have always been outside the scope of Section 230 immunity, online crime is a serious and growing problem, and there is no justification for blocking the federal government from civil enforcement on behalf of American citizens. The media release finishes off by saying, finally, the department proposes carving out certain categories of civil claims that are far outside Section 230's core objective, including offences involving child sexual abuse, terrorism and cyberstalking. These amendments working together will be critical first steps and enabling victims to seek redress for the most serious of online crimes. So I'll put a link to that legislation and also to Trump's executive order from May in the video description. And I think this is a crucial piece of legislative amendment to be brought forward and proposed. I suspect it's going to get some blockage from the Dems in America. And this, as I said, even though this is an American piece of legislation, the Section 230 really governs the behaviour and the business model of companies like Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter around the world, because they're global, they're international platforms. So this will flow through around the world, guys. Anyway, great. Really happy to share this with you. It's a good move. It's good news, and it's well overdue. But we can see it as a bit of a boom, another boom here. So because you watch these social media companies, and we've got Facebook now they've been announcing for 2 months that they've got new terms and conditions coming in from the 1st of October. We've had really good YouTube content creator channels completely taken down or shadow banned, or taken off for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They're just trying to get out the truth about the CV-19 scamdemic and many other things, child sex trafficking, etc., that has been going on. So as the social media companies ramp it up, so is the Justice Department. They're ramping up the counter move, and this is a great boom. Good to talk to you guys. Take care. God bless. I'll see you next time. Bye.